Late night store clerks. What are the strangest things that have happened on the job? I work nights at a gas station in a pretty good neighborhood in New Hampshire, so usually it's pretty boring. One night, I did have a customer really creep me out. I was just getting ready to close down the store when a little old man came in. He was small and dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. I made the usual small talk of asking him how his day was going. Then, as I was handing him his change, he firmly grabbed my wrist, made direct eye contact with me, and said, "Hell is a real place, and the devil has already got his hand on you, girl. Be careful." I worked third shift at a Sheetz. For those of you who don't know, it's a gas station / convenience store / fast food place. On multiple occasions, I have been cussed out because we discontinued pickle chips. I've had people tell me to screw off, break things, demand to call corporate, etc. Drunk people love pickle chips. Edit, I get it, sober people love pickle chips too. I've never been a store clerk, but I was lucky enough to witness the following story. 7-Eleven, circa 1996. A guy walks up to the surly clerk, who seemed to work 25 hours a day, and asks, "Do you sell eggs by the half dozen?" Clerk, "No, you have to buy a dozen." Guy, "I only need 6. Clerk, "I don't care. You get 12 or you get 0. Without saying another word, the guy walks back to get his dozen eggs, pays, and walks out. Then he throws his 6 unwanted eggs at the store window before driving off. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift in an all-night garage for a few months when I was 18. There was this weird Vietnamese dude who always drove a white Honda Prelude and always filled up with 666 pounds of petrol. He wore the same pair of cutoffs every time, with blotches and bruises all over his legs, and used to literally wander in, leaning against the displays, pick up as many yogurts as he could carry, pay with the 50-pound note, and stagger out. One time he came in with these 2, obviously prostitute women, who were draped all over him with the biggest pupils I have ever seen. They stood at the counter while I scanned all their yogurts, and he spoke for the first and only time. Staring at me, said to the women, "She can join us, can't she?" One of the women looked at me and said, "You'll make a lot more money if you come with us, darling." I nervously laughed, took their cash, and they left, grinning in silence. The place I worked had a monitor / camera that showed you on it as you walked it. It was like 10 minutes before closing, and a guy walks in and just starts rapping into the camera and acting like he's shooting a music video. He went through an entire song. A man came in 10 times within a single hour. He kept leaving and coming back without buying a single thing. Finally, on the 10th time, he comes up to the counter with a box of tampons. I proceed to ask him, "Rough night?" To which he responded, "I really don't want to talk about it." Had a guy pull up to the pump, unhooked it wanting post-pay. Our policy said not to authorize it between midnight and 5 a.m., which was prepay only. I announced this to the dude over the loudspeaker. I'm pretty sure he was wasted. He continued to get more and more belligerent. When he started beating the pumps with the nozzle / hose, I called the cops. Dude starts banging on the door. Locked, no way he could get in. Can't, gets frustrated, and finally just whips his deal out and starts wagging it in the general direction of the store. The CCTV is getting all this, so I just start laughing my butt off. Then, the cops pull up, and 2 deputies put this poor, drunk, deal-wagging man away in the back of a police car. I quit a few months after that. I worked at a small convenience store in the early 1990s. They had one of those fry delis that had chicken, JoJo's, corn dogs, burritos, etc. This particular night, I had run out of burritos and chicken. I also shut the thing down and cleaned it all out about an hour before closing. About 5 minutes before I was closing up, a guy walked in and asked for some burritos. I told him I was out of them, and that I was just about to close and the fryer was shut down. He walked around the store for a minute. I assumed he was looking for something else to buy, and then he came up to the counter, pulled out a knife, and told me if I didn't cook him some burritos, he was going to stab me. I freaked out, but told him I had none to cook. I showed him the freezer and told him I would happily cook anything he wanted from it, but he will see I was out of burritos. He looked at it for about a minute, turned to me, and said, "You really are out." I replied, "Yeah." He then put the knife away and left the store. Edits. Just to clarify, a JoJo is basically a deep-fried potato wedge. They were very popular where I grew up. I guess there are other names for them in other parts of the country, but where I grew up, we called them JoJos, and you ordered them by weight. For example, you would say, "Give me a half pound of JoJos." Also, as far as I know, the guy never got caught. I called the police and described the guy, but never heard from them again, so I assume he got away. The Burrito Bandito could still be roaming the streets. And thanks for the gold, kind burrito-loving soul. It's official. My highest rated comment ever is about nearly being stabbed over a burrito. A guy came in to buy beer after hours. Told him I couldn't sell. It was against the law. He pulled out a badge, said, "I am the law." I called 911 and a cop shows up. Tells me if I can just let it go, I wouldn't have any more problems. I let it go. 2 weeks later, driving home late at night, way over the speed limit, I got pulled over. It was cop number 2. He came up to the car, recognized me, said, "Slow down," and left. I used to work the graveyard at a gas station near my place. A pretty normal night. Clean, stock smokes, clean again, sit behind the counter. A woman came in about mid-30s with a little boy with her. She was in tears and her clothes were torn a bit. She came up and asked to use the phone. When she got off without getting an answer, she asked to stay here for a bit. I told her it would be no problem. About 20 minutes go by, and I wound up giving her and her kid free drinks and one of the sandwiches we have on the hot rack. She was in the store for about 30 minutes until her, quote, boyfriend came in and found her and her kid. He was pretty calm at first, but then started screaming at her and telling her she needs to come with him. Luckily, before anything crazy happened, a cruiser pulled up to the front and 2 cops came in and intervened. He was arrested right there. I guess he had been beating her in front of her kid and she was trying to run away. I'm glad I got to keep her away from harm for at least a little bit. It was a scary night. Let's see. Closed the store to play hockey on the roof. Had a guy come in and, quote, inspect individual eggs in each carton until he found the perfect egg. Had an old guy who asked to use our bathroom, but first he needed reading material and asked for an adult mag from behind the counter. But when we gave it to him, he said he didn't like that one and asked for a different one. Then he died while taking a crap. You know, normal stuff like that. I actually used to work retail for a couple months. Craziest interaction I ever had was a guy who came up to me and started striking up conversation, but what he said really stuck out to me. He said, "You should subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below." I just kinda nodded and thanked him for watching. Some people. Huge guy comes in and asks to use the restroom. No big deal. I'm not one to stand in the way of nature. Well, maybe 20 minutes later, guy comes out in a huff and says, "Dude, I'm really sorry. I screwed up your toilet. It's all good, man. I'll get it." Not really needing spectators while I cleaned crap, I expect the guy to shrug his shoulders and walk off. Well, he looks back into the back where the restroom is with a look of disgusting concern and says, "Man, it's really coming out. Like, it's coming out into the back room." I rush back, thinking I've got to at least stop this from becoming some kind of biohazard event. I round the corner and there's nothing, but I can smell an unholy, overwhelming stench. I continue back, expecting to ruin my shoes at any moment until I reach the men's room. At this point, I've had to cover my face with my shirt and focus on breathing through my mouth, but I reach the door with no issue. Frustrated from the mind-numbing odor alone, I push the men's room door open, ready for at least an inch of gas station dukes all over the floor. As the door swings forward, I see nothing but water filling my eyes and the black/brown human paint the fat jerk left against the back of the bowl. Ticked to the point of rushing out, fully intending on asking this rotten jerk what the deal was, I round the corner again to see his big, poop-eating grin spread across his face. Stinks, huh? TLDR, got jigsawed in the breathing in noxious fumes. I worked at a 24/7 gas station in a small college town. One night, the club across the street had a fight break out and about 50 people were pepper sprayed by the police when they responded at about 1:30 a.m. 5 minutes later, cue 50 angry club-goers bursting into the store, running to the dairy cooler, dousing themselves in milk, and then running back out. I just stood there in utter confusion and then told my boss I didn't want the late shift anymore. Edit, man, I really missed out on an amusing pun with utter confusion, huh? Not a late night clerk, as my store closes at 9, but some pretty strange things have happened. In no particular order, a woman tried to tell me that Jesus could talk to her through her eyes and that we were all going to hell. A man came in for no reason other than to take a dump in aisle 3. Some guy tried to come in and steal cigarettes from behind our counter and may have gotten away with it if he had not then tried to buy cigarettes with the other ones stuffed down his shirt. 2 different people have tried to lock themselves in our bathroom and tell us that that was their home now. Once a week, someone will try to buy our entire cereal aisle, just pulling entire displays off the shelf and trying to do it as quickly as possible, like getting into a line is some sort of free pass and we have to let them buy the stuff. An ex-employee one time came back in after hours as we were closing down stuff for the night and started to work. She was behind the deli counter just cutting meat, talking to invisible customers. We later found out she was high on pills. A guy got locked in our bathroom freezer after hours. We only knew he was there because he escaped and broke a window that set off our alarms. That was the first time we replaced the giant display windows. The second time was right after we had just shut down for the night. Kids on bikes threw rocks through our windows. The sound was terrifying. Even though we had them on camera, the store never pressed charges. Story time. In high school, I worked at a little mom-and-pop department store. We sold odds and ends at super high prices, and they eventually went out of business when I was a couple of years into college. Anyway, one night I was working a closing shift, and that involved shutting down the registers, turning off all the lights, etc. We had just stocked these baby doll toys on the shelf that day, those motion-sensing ones that giggled and cooed when you got close to them. Well, the lights turning off must have triggered them, because after the first chunk goes out, we hear coos. Second chunk goes out, giggles. Third chunk goes out, and we hear, "Islam is the light!" Needless to say, we whipped those suckers back to the manufacturer. They didn't know about the propaganda babies because they only said that phrase randomly, so it must have gotten past whatever testing process they had. Very freaky to hear in a dark store at night. I watched a truck pull up to one of our pumps. Guy gets out to pump gas. A Durango comes hauling it from the back of the building. Another guy gets out with a gun aimed at the first guy. I was on the phone with a friend of mine and said, "Someone just pulled a gun at the pump. I'm gonna have to let you go." I called the cops. Turned out the guy pumping gas had robbed a store 3 towns over, and the Durango was an undercover cop who had been in pursuit. Another time, a guy came in, walked to the back cooler, got a can of Sprite, and came to the register to check out. As I'm ringing him up, one of our local cops walks in, gun drawn, says, "Put your hands on the counter, put your hands on the counter now." Well, I put my hands on the counter along with the customer because all I'm thinking is, I have no idea what I've done, but I'm very sorry for it. Turned out that guy had been involved with the robbery of a convenience store in the next town, 5 minutes away, and had fled in a Mustang with 2 other individuals. They wrecked the car trying to evade the cops. All 3 dispersed, 2 were apprehended pretty quickly, but the third came into the store to either blend in or rob me. I honestly don't know which. After the festivities and them hauling the guy away, the cop told me he had almost lost it when I put my hands on the counter too, and that I should really rethink working closing shifts at my age. I was 19 at the time, and I am female. I laughed and I was like, "Give up free entertainment?" Edit. First story to clarify, the undercover cop jumped out of the Durango with a gun pointed at the suspect. Graveyard shift at a gas station. Full serve gets shut down after 11 p.m. because there's only one clerk on site. Traffic cones block the full serve pumps, signs inform the customer. Around midnight, a van pulls up with California plates and peace love signs in the windows. Woman gets out, moves the traffic cones, and pulls up to full serve. I use the intercom to tell her that she will have to use self-serve if she wants gas. No answer. I go to the door and try to wave her over or call out to her. Can't see any sign of her. I shrug and go back inside. I'm not allowed to leave the store unattended, so there's not much I can do. 10 minutes later, a woman gets out of the van and comes in. "I've been waiting for service for over an hour," she says. I decide not to argue about the time elapsed and just say, "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we don't offer full serve after 11. Perhaps you noticed the traffic cones and signs to that effect? You expect to pump my own gas?" she says. Again, I'm sorry. I'd be happy to help you, but I can't leave the store unattended. I appreciate your understanding. She snorts and digs a 20 out of her purse and tosses it on the counter. She goes out, moves the van to self-serve, pumps the gas. Then she comes back. "May I use your restroom, please?" she asks. "Absolutely. Right back there," I say, relieved. She goes to the restroom, and she's in there for about 15 minutes. I start to worry. Finally, she comes out and comes to the counter. "I know all about you," she says. You're the one who brought the Black Plague. You brought it all the time forever. It was always you. You caused all those deaths, all that suffering. Did you like hearing the babies wail and scream? I bet you loved it. All the demons love it. That's you. You're a demon. You are evil. I can tell. And I'll tell you something else. You skunk me up, I'll skunk you back. I stared at her, retreating back, speechless. She got in her van and drove away. Skunk her up? Because I didn't pump her gas? Weird. I went back to fronting shelves for about 30 seconds before I thought, perhaps I should check the bathroom. I walked back and pushed open the door. Poop. Poop everywhere. On the walls, the floor, the mirror, the sink, all over the toilet lid and the tank, crap on the door, clearly smeared by hand. And oh, the stench. As I turned to get the cleaning supplies, I muttered under my breath, "You skunked me back, all right. Yes, you did." I worked through my college years at a grocery store in a college town. I worked in the deli/bakery and daytime cashier. One night, I was asked to work the late shift for time and a half. I didn't have class the next day, so heck yeah. It was a night I'll never forget. As I was transitioning from day to late night shift around 9 p.m., a kid came in and started just eating olives off the deli bar with his bare hands. Cops get called. He is found 5 minutes later assaulting the soda machine outside, screaming and crying at the same time. Then arrested while high on what was probably PCP or meth. A plethora of drunk sorority and frat jerks pouring in between midnight and 3 a.m. trying to buy alcohol when they were already wasted. The town had a bus system that ran all over the place for free, and we were a very central stop. Had to call a, quote, code wood to summon our late-night stalker who was indeed built like a tree trunk. Some punks wanted to steal some Phillies and demanded to, quote, just hold on to them while they shopped, then got confrontational when I wouldn't give the Phillies to them before paying. For clarification, since I'm a terrible writer, Wood was a night stockman who probably went to bodybuilding competitions on the weekends. Hence, I was calling him to the front to help me deal with the hooligans until the police could show up. After the cops showed up with their canine from said confrontation, she decided to hang out and talk to me for a while. She showed me a bunch of fake IDs she collected. Insomniac Kid kept coming into the store to buy food and smokes. The street sweeper guys showed up around 5 a.m. to clean the lot. They had to come inside to use the restroom. In that amount of time, their street sweeper got stolen because they left the keys in and running. Not sure if they ever got it back, but I imagine it will be hard to hide in a small college town. TLDR, what was a highly functional, prestigious college town got rather seedy at night. I also spent a lot of time reading, but I don't suppose people came here to read about my Asimov novel. Edit: Phillies are a cigarillo/blunt used to smoke weed, usually in a party scenario. They are commonly shoplifted after normal business hours. Thus, they are kept behind the counter so they are not easily accessed. Back from my days working graveyard shift at a grocery store. Let's see what I can remember. Had a former employee come in drunk one night and call the cops on himself for shoplifting because he wanted somewhere to sleep that night. Had an employee come in on a night off all ticked off, proceeds to walk straight to the back room without a word. About 10 minutes later, there was a successive loud pop, 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 pop. Turns out he climbed up to the roof to fire his gun. A customer came up and told me he heard something fall down in the back room. Tons of stoners buying ice cream at 2 a.m. Meth heads buying Brillo pads and ammonia after 3 a.m. Bars closed at 2 a.m., so all the cops were usually gone from the area by around 3. Saw a drunk guy fall asleep while his car idled along in the parking lot. Luckily, he hit a curb and no damage was done, but the cops got a good laugh out of that one. A tall, drunk Russian guy tries to buy beer after the 2 a.m. legal cutoff time, then proceeds to pick on a sober customer half his size. The little guy took one swing and broke the Russian dude's nose. Had a guy come in when another employee was taking a dump. I'm so sorry that there's so much poop in this episode, I have no idea why. Guy really had to take a dump, so we turned around and took a dump at the urinal, asking the employee on the toilet for toilet paper. In high school, I worked at a 24-hour pharmacy which also had a small selection of beer. At about 2 a.m., this guy walks in 3 sheets to the wind, saunters over to the beer, and grabs 2 12-packs. He comes up to the counter and slams the beer down, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out a half-eaten taco and puts it on the counter. I couldn't say anything because I was so perplexed. I just let him walk out with the beer and told my bosses I thought he might have a gun also. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. A couple weeks later, he apparently tried this at the family-owned gas station across the street and got shot. I worked at Dunkin Donuts. Every Tuesday night at about 8:45, a guy would come in. A guy in Daisy Dukes and a sequined bikini top. He was balding, had a beer gut, and chest hair. He would strut his stuff to the counter and order 2 sprinkled donuts. Every Tuesday. Honestly, I aspire to that level of confidence. Used to work third shift overnight in a Texaco 20 years ago. One night, this guy in a bright yellow Mustang comes in to buy gas and beer. I run his credit card, and the register flags it for being stolen. So I tell the guy, your car won't work. Says I have to keep it. So the guy kind of freaks out, leaves his beer, then hops in his car and speeds off. I call the cops because he already pumped his gas and left without paying for it. So later, I walk home at 6 a.m. I lived only a 5-minute walk away. As I'm walking, I see the yellow Mustang parked at an apartment complex across from the street from my house. So I go back to work and call the cops again, explaining that I know where the guy lives. Presumably, after that they found him and arrested him or whatever. A few days later, I had to do a friend a favor and take her to visit her boyfriend, who was in jail at the time. On our way out of the jail, some guy walks up to her to bum a cigarette off of her. It was the guy with the yellow Mustang. I sped up to walk ahead of them, so hopefully he wouldn't recognize my face. She gives him a cigarette, and he proceeds to complain about how he got arrested because he found a credit card, so of course he was going to buy some gas and beer with it. He didn't recognize me, so I remain unmurdered. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.